Peter, I've been reading Jed McKenna books, and I don't know if you care to comment on that stuff in here.
Sure.
But he talked about the first step, and I keep wondering if that's like a big sounding first step, like in Dzogchen, like initiation. You know, you talk about the 3 steps in Dzogchen. Each one seems rather big, and like it's like lightning striking or something.
Yeah.
Is it similar to that, or can it be that there's like a sequence of sort of first steps, like on smaller scales, where you sort of see? It's like I can relate to seeing, you know, to a large degree, things are not what I thought they were. I'm not what I thought I was, but it seems like on a smaller scale.
I think that, you know, what he refers to as the first step is crucial, and it may or may not look like a particular big event, but it's a matter of an actual commitment to reality, you know, kind of reality or bust.
Right.
I mean, basically, what that looks like, it might look like nothing, or it may look like a big thing.
Right.
But it's basically leaving the herd. It's leaving the sort of consensus reality of humans that most people are more or less carried along within. Just saying, no, I'm not necessarily going that way. I'm going to find where reality is and go there. Mm-hmm. So it's a commitment, and it's not an intention of commitment. It's the actuality of commitment.
Right.
It's the actuality of. I mean, that's why calling it a step is meaningful, because you're like step. You're breaking step. You're moving into a different direction. Moving commitment towards finding reality. Really.
Yeah. That makes sense.
You're orienting towards truth rather than orienting towards comfort or convenience.
Right.
And that's a kind of a. I mean, that can, depending on your temperament, that can be a big turning point. If you previously had sort of gone with the crowd, you know, to all of a sudden have that as your guiding light is quite a different thing.
Yeah. And he also talks about spiritual adulthood versus spiritual enlightenment or realization. So
I don't worry about that kind of thing too much. I think it's sort of it's out of proportion. I mean, the point is that where you end up, so to speak, or where you are traversing, you don't really have control over. Mm-hmm. So to worry about whether it's, you know, the heights as far as you can go, or something less than that is irrelevant.
Yeah.
You know, the point is to go for the gold, and then you get what you get, and you know, good for you.
So that first step would pertain to either one.
Yeah. Well, in his system, yeah.
Right. I see.
But ultimately, yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, it's more of a sort of theoretical distinction than an actual distinction between what he calls, enlightenment versus human adulthood.
Right.
Enlightenment is not with reference to anything, whereas human adulthood is with reference to being all you can be.
Right.
And they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Or they aren't, but they aren't necessarily the same thing.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense.
In fact, they are the same thing.
Well, ultimately, yeah, of course.
There's also, it seems, I mean, from my reading, that there are many people who've gone through first, second and third steps in an instant. I mean, they've just woken up enlightened.
Yeah, well, and
whatever it is. Or
yeah, there's no recipe, there's no rule book as to how these things happen. You know, I mean, everyone is so unique in terms of the resources and innate characteristics they have to bring to bear, as well as the situation and obstacles they have to work in the context of, that there's no you cannot generalize about what this looks like in any person's case. For some people it may be very easy, for some people it may be very fast, for some people it may be very prolonged but very easy, for other people it may be very fast but very difficult, for other people it may be very prolonged and very difficult. There's all the permutations, and it can be anything. But that's irrelevant. The point is not to worry about what it looks like, but to do what you have to.
Yeah, Jen McKenna seems to emphasize the difficult aspect. More than
Well, typically there is some difficulty involved.
Yeah. It seems like the difficulty could have been, right. It could have been some other time, thing from the past.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? Yeah. But trying to generalize, the sort of fallacy about trying to generalize about spirituality, of this is what awakening looks like, this is what awakening includes, and all that sort of thing, is sort of spinning theory, and in actuality it's never theoretical, it's always empirical.
Yeah. And
what actually happens is always unique. So you can generate all these theories in the first step, and the this and the that and the other, sort of a theory of awakening, a theory of enlightenment, a theory of unfoldment, and all that. But it's really not much point.
It's just another map or model.
Yeah, and the model is going to be, not actually apply in any given case accurately.
Yeah.
People are so unique. It's to sort of think, well, we're all kind of the same, and we all kind of have to do the same thing, and it's crap. It's absolutely untrue. Mm-hmm. People are so unique. The notion that all men are created equal, from the point of view of functionality, is an absurdity. It's completely absurd. The deck is completely stacked. Some people have all aces. Yeah. Other people have crap. You got to play the hand you're dealt,
right.
And or get some wild cards, and or have the wit to steal cards from someone else, and whatever it looks like, whatever resources you have to bring to bear.
Yeah.
Be born rich, great, cool, or be a really good liar and cheater, cool. Whatever works.
Or be born really poor.
Whatever. But everyone is in an absolutely unique situation with absolutely unique resources. So it's really pointless to generalize.
Yeah.
What you can really do, what I believe in is emphasize the goal, emphasize what this is about and where it is, and then if the person has the wit to intuit where they are and what they have to do to orient towards. It's like showing you where north is. Mm-hmm. And then, so once you know where north is, then you have to figure out where you are.
Yeah.
And then what to do about it. But but where north is sort of the important information.
Right.
And then you can generalize about various tricks. But some tricks will be absolutely useless for some people.
Yeah.
Because different things will work for different people. Different people have different resources they can bring to bear in terms of their intelligence or their, proclivities or whatever, right?
Yeah. Another thing I was wondering about was if I look at going through my experience and then also sort of removing everything that's just been told to me or belief or whatever. It removes quite a lot of stuff, for instance, that anything ever happened to me, or that I was born, or that anything will ever happen, all kinds of stuff like that. And does that matter as a thing to think about, or it's just like something that comes with it? Is there significance to that? Because there's an instruction just to keep going to experience, just keep going to it.
Well, see what it is. I mean, see that this stuff is all just hearsay. It's all just, assertions, empty assertions with circumstantial evidence. And once you see it, you can discount it.
Yeah.
But you don't need to necessarily do that explicitly and wade through it. But you need to do whatever you need to do to get to that result.
Right.
Of clearly seeing, just because someone says this, and even just because everyone has always said this, doesn't mean anything other than everyone always says this.
Right. Yeah.
There's not necessarily a basis for it. And look for yourself. In other words, basically, you have to reinvent the wheel. You can't take anything for granted.
Yeah.
You have to look first-hand evidence for yourself. You have to find what's true for you, and you cannot take anything whatsoever, any assertions, no matter how logical, that you've gotten historically or conceptually or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to verify it for yourself to see what's really what.
Right.
And separate that from what people say, because people say all kinds of stuff, and 99.99999% of it is completely absurdity.
Yeah.
It can still point in the right direction, perhaps.
Sure, yeah, but even that you have to. I mean, there's all these pointers, but you have to find which ones are good. So you have to somehow rise to that occasion, either by verifying them or by having a supernatural intuition or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to make it work. The buck stops there. So
Right.
there's all this people saying all this stuff to you. Okay, cool, but it's up to you to sort it out and see which of it you're going to give credence to, if any.
Right.
And so on.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even stuff that people are saying. It's stuff I guess most of it is stuff I'm saying to myself, or
Sure. But a lot of that comes from either explicit or subliminal sort of implications of the semantic system we've been steeped in, and cultural implications we've been steeped in.
Right.
All our lives.
Yeah.
So, we've been raised in a context of intelligences that have no idea what they are or what this is.
Yeah.
But a lot of information has been thrown around, either explicitly or implicitly, and so there's liable to be a lot of crap out there.
Right. Yeah, kind of add a few nines to that.
Which is another kind of indicator of the first step. I mean, the first step is ultimately just simply that, saying, wait a minute, I'm going to sort this, I'm going to take responsibility for this, I'm going to see what's true for myself, and just because all this stuff has been said to me or been fed to me or I've been brainwashed in, you're basically standing up and saying, no, this is my life, I'm going to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the essence of the first step, is taking responsibility for your own orientation, rather than just sort of following along with the momentum of how you've been pushed by circumstances and upbringing and programming and etc.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily black or white. It's not like your programming necessarily completely dissipates or your history is not a factor. But there's this extra factor of your assuming executive function. You're saying, no, I'm going to be steering this boat. I'm going to be sorting this out. I'm not going to just take anything on faith.
I see currents for myself going on in both directions or at the same time. It's like areas where I'm sort of taking more of a responsibility, and then there's other ones where I'm not.
Sure. And that can be fine too, or not. It depends on your genius at being able to discriminate where it matters or not.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, you only have to. You can You can do 99% of it wrong. You don't have to do 1% of it right, but it has to be the right 1%.
Uh-huh.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not like you need to sort out your whole life and rewrite the encyclopedia and all this other stuff. You can kind of basically, most of that is hogwash but innocuous. So
right.
it just doesn't matter. It's just, well, I'm steeped in the milieu of this absurdly, fantastical civilization that doesn't know its ass from an elbow.
Right.
But most of that doesn't really matter. It's just, well, okay, sure, that's the case. But you have to, the trick is to have the genius to see what matters and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because most misinformation is just noise in the system. It doesn't matter one way or the other. You don't need to waste your time sorting it all out.
Yeah.
You can just, okay, yeah, sure,
right.
whatever.
Yeah, that's good.
But you have to find the hot spots and not let them wait a minute, that one matters, and bang, you hit it right away when you see that.
Right.
It's a matter of efficiency.
Yeah.
Finding the power spots, so to speak, and hitting those. And then you can let the rest of the stuff you can just let go because it doesn't matter one way or the other. It may be hogwash, but who cares? Because it has no significant impact.
Yeah.
And the more superficial misinformation is the least important. It's the fundamental misinformation that tends to be the most important.
Mm-hmm.
Like that you exist, that
right.
space and time exist. These kinds of more bedrock things are like, wait a minute, red flag here, what's really going on with that? And whether or not this happened or that happened or what's popular music or something, who cares?
Right.
Fashions or the way people talk, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's just noise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful.
So what happens with that you exist? That's usually pointed out as the starting place. In many traditions they say, okay, this is the one inconceivable, irrefutable fact
Right.
of existence. That's the one thing that we do know that you exist, that there is existence, that you know beingness is there.
Right, sure. Well, the fact is less at issue than exactly what it consists of, and to verify it for yourself up close and personal. So rather than just, I exist, existence is no, it's like, no, well, okay, yeah, maybe so, but what is it? And then to really get for you firsthand, very detailed, very precise experience of, oh yes, this is existence. And so you're being with it as a concrete experiential reality, very precise reality, rather than as a principle that has any degree of vagueness about it. Do you know what I mean? So in that sense, it's not that you're just throwing it out, but you're making it personal, you're making it your own, you're owning the reality of it very precisely and very intimately. I mean, it's really a matter of penetrating sloppy thought to any degree to get to experiential verification. And then thought can follow the experience, and then it's fine, it just reflects the experience. But thought can masquerade, sloppy thought can masquerade as truth without, while still being somewhat divergent from the experiential reality. And the point is to sort of find that point of focus where the experience, so what is the experience of being exactly? What it really is it? And then, okay, yeah, then you can say, yeah, there's being, but you're saying it authoritatively. You're saying it from first hand rather than just, yeah, sure, there's being. You know, the Upanishads say that, and so, yeah, it sounds true. It's obvious, you know. But you haven't really done the math yourself. You haven't really you haven't made it yours. You see what I mean?
So if there's any kind of sensing involved, then it's still not clear. So.
Not necessarily. You have to just be with what the sensing is. It's a matter of being with reality, pure and simple. But, you know, it's learning to penetrate abstraction, to develop a really, really sensitive abstraction detector. Because when we, you know, if there's any degree of sloppy thinking we have, there may be abstractions that slightly diverge from actuality, and we're not noticing that fact. So it's kind of just getting very sensitive to whether or not something is an abstraction.
But if you're sensing, aren't you using the eye to sense it?
I don't know, not necessarily. It depends what you mean by sensing, I guess. I mean, to me, sensing is ultimately the exercise of mysterious power of engagement with reality.
Okay,
And then you may or may not be holding that as an abstraction, and you're using the word sensing for something that is that, but isn't being seen as that.
Yeah.
But it's like there's physicality to it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Always. I mean, you could say physicality, or let's just say experientiality. But physicality is fine. It's not divorced from physicality.
Well, what the apparent body has to contribute are sensing mechanisms or devices or sensing.
There's physical senses, but there's also mental experience and perception that may or may not be physically based, but they're still experiential. And the point is it's experiential, whether or not it's explicitly physical, whether or not you're categorizing it as physical or not. It is experiential. In other words, experiential is a more fundamental category than physical or not. So physical sensing, actual physical sensing, is also ultimately experiential, right?
Right, but I'm wondering if that has to get cut through and go beyond that.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. If you go to it on the level of experientiality, then whether it's physical or not, you bypass it, becomes irrelevant. Then you're being with it on its primal. The primal fact is experiential, and then whether or not it's physical is sort of a subcategorization. Ultimately, it turns out to be an abstraction. You know, you can see with your eyes, and then you can go to sleep and dream, and you're walking around seeing, and it seems to be with eyes, but then it's not really with eyes, and so the one is not physical, but the other is, and it just turns into a whole can of worms. Whereas you just get there's the experience of seeing, and it may or may not be with physical eyes, but that's a subsequent categorization and is largely irrelevant, because the experience of seeing is the experience of seeing, whether it's in a dream with no eyes, or in this waking state, or with apparent eyes, or whatever. And that becomes less relevant. That becomes a sort of a splitting hairs of subcategorization and subclassification that turns, when you're being with it on the level of experientiality, just turns out to be a moot point. It's like, well, you can let the pundits argue about that, but it's not really relevant in terms of being with the actuality, which is the important part for realization. Is to be with what is actually present, as it is actually present. And on the level of experientiality, that's pretty much the core of it.
So what I hear you saying, that finer, that further refinement is necessary, or is required.
Further refinement of what, from what to what?
From sensing.
Right.
Not getting distracted or focusing too much on that as a...
Yeah, sure. I mean, sensing is fundamentally experiencing. So, okay, so sensing is experiencing, so ignore it as sensing and be with it as experiencing and see what it is. And then you'll notice, oh wow, there's a lot of other things that are experiencing that aren't sensing. I mean, thinking is experiencing, but it's arguably not sensing in the sense of using a physical sense organ, and so on and so forth. And yet, when you're with your experience, when you're with what thinking is, and then you're with what seeing is on the same level as what thinking is, i.e. on the immediate experiential level, they turn out to have a whole lot in common. And the physicality or not it turns out to be largely irrelevant. And it's not that it's not physical, or that it is physical for that matter, it just is irrelevant. You're not dealing with it on that level. You could say it's going to the absolute objectivity of absolute subjectivity. And if that makes you dizzy...
no, that's good.
No, that's absolutely right.
That's
Yeah.
good.
That absolute subjectivity is an absolutely objective fact. So you're being with the absolute subjectivity. This is experiential, period. And that is the objective fact.
On the way up here, we had this conversation, and I guess that may be what sparked some of what I've been saying, but I was trying to express the difference between knowing and sensing, in as much as I can sense truth. We all can sense truth. It's inherent in, I think, in the human condition. I don't know that, but to know it is something different.
Yeah. And when you know it, you are it. When
That's
you know
right.
it, it's naked identity. It's absolute.
Yes.
It's not arguable or intuited or sensed or implied or implicit or I can prove it. It just is self-evidently the fact.
But actually, that sense of truth that we all have is just that far away from knowing it.
Well, it ultimately is a knowing, but
It
it's
is.
murkily confused by sloppy
By
thinking and sensing and misinterpreting and
Right.
and over these overlays of concepts like body and this and that,
Yeah.
which is superimposed over the primal knowing. I mean, we all know we are. You know, we were talking about being. You know, being as a philosophical principle. We all know we are. I mean, you know that. It's not like, you know, I could say, you know, you aren't really. It's like you'd laugh at me. I mean, whether or not you would, you might not. But inside, you'd be going, yeah, right, give me a break. Because it's self-evident, you know it. And yet, you could possibly be unclear about, you could have unclarity sort of overlaid on that knowing if you had other sort of complications that you had invested faith in or belief or unconscious belief in. You sort of were holding them to be true. But that holding to be true is not as primal as the actual knowing, which is 100% intimate. See what I mean?
Well, I would say, yeah, I know that because I feel it.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's like
Yeah.
the starting point.
Yeah.
I know it because
Yeah.
I feel it.
So you get to the absolute, most intimate, most fundamental, most nakedly brilliant level of that, I know it because I feel it, and cool, great. Start there and throw everything else out. And then sort of rebuild, then see, okay, what's it look like from here? You know, what does it look like from here? If there's just that, you know, and you throw everything else away, then what? You know, do you need anything else? What's it look like? What's implicit? What's there? What do you find? And then you can, from that perspective, you can look at all these overlays and see well, yeah, this is sort of interesting, and this is an interesting theory, and this is a kind of has some nice implications. But you see that they're sort of abstractions to some degree. They're ways of categorizing something that is a primal fact, and a categorization by its very nature is an abstraction. This is, and it's a cup, but its isness is primal. And whether it's a cup or an airplane, whether it's beautiful or ugly, is an abstraction that is much less primal than the fact that it is. Do you know what I mean? And so to get to that layer of primacy automatically leaves a lot of stuff behind. And then you can look, and then from that perspective, you can look at that stuff you've left behind and see if you're really, whether or not you're well rid of it. And you don't need to leave it behind. You can still go around. It's not like you need to forget this is a cup, but I know when I say it's a cup that's totally secondary information. It's ridiculous. But I don't need to not say it's a cup. But I know what it is. I know its truth, which has nothing to do with cupness. And likewise with your own being, with the being of your experience, of course, which is the primal truth. And then, so from that perspective, from that, you feel it. It's a felt, naked, obvious reality. Then, okay, so what does the world look like from that perspective? What's going on? If you just go to that perspective and suspend all the elaborations, where are you? What's going on? What's happening? What is it like? That's really all we're talking about.
Okay, we've had a request to turn the sound up on your computer there.
The sound up? Well, really? Huh, okay. Looks pretty hot to me. All right. Well, I just pegged. I pegged it with a whistle, so if that's not enough, try turning up the computer on your end. Out there in TV land. I mean, in practical terms, the very essence of spiritual confusion is not being clearly able to distinguish abstractions from concrete fact. I mean, that's the essence of the spiritual dilemma, is thinking things that are just hypotheses, abstractions, intellectual notions are somehow true, concretely true. And, we are able to do that through sort of habits of sloppy thinking, and through having been brainwashed and browbeat by our semantic environment and so on all our lives. But really, spirituality really just consists of learning critical thinking in a profound sense. It really just learns about noticing what is real and what is an idea about what is real. Because there is reality. It's not just all ideas. There is actuality. There is isness. There is an actual condition, and it is exactly the way that it is. Right? But there's also a whole lot of ideas about what that condition is that are not accurate, or are not comprehensively accurate, or are not 100% accurate, that we're all completely steeped in, just culturally. And the trick is to just have a really sharp sense of which is which, to be able to see, oh, wait, that's an abstraction. What's the actuality? The sort of Manjushri.
So take something like isness.
Good start. Real good start. I like your attitude. Go for the jugular.
Yeah. Let's not take an apple or something small.
That could very well be an abstraction.
Yeah, but you have to. But that's the point. You have to sort that for yourself.
So, I'm just trying to differentiate between an abstraction and a knowing.
Right.
And that knowing, I mean, you
Good.
could investigate it more and say, okay, you know, the mind's coming in to give that a word
Right.
and make it inclusive of existence and,
Right.
you know, now is that a concept or is that a knowing? And, I mean, it
Yeah.
just
Well, you have to.
seems like a knowing, but
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. You have to learn to not use the mind as your tool of investigation. You have to learn to use your experience, your experiencing, your naked experiencing, as a tool for investigating, which is not conceptual. Experience itself is not a concept. And experiencing, as an action, the verb, experiencing, is not a concept. It's an actuality that is what you are and where you live in actuality and what you are doing. You are experience and you are experiencing. And that is preconceptual, or transconceptual, paraconceptual, metaconceptual, whatever, right? It's not a concept, it's an actuality, and it's not a conceptual actuality. And from that perspective, when you look from that perspective of experiencing, you look at conceptualization like an object, and it's over there. And you can examine it then in terms of what it really is, because experiencing is the bedrock. And from that bedrock, you look at these concepts, and from that perspective, the concepts are very obviously concepts. From the conceptual perspective, it's not so obvious. So from the conceptual, you can look at the ideas of being, and you can look at experience, but from that perspective, you can't really tell them apart so clearly, because the triangulation is wrong. You don't have an accurate perspective. But from the perspective of actual experience itself, the core actual experiencing, which is not a concept. It's intelligent, but it's not an abstracted intelligence. It's not a conceptual intelligence. It's an immediately engaged, energetic intelligence.
right, you can't look at it.
No, you can't look at it. It looks at itself. Yeah, you are it.
You are it.
And from that, and when you are it, and when you're knowing you are it, you're beyond thought. That's not an idea. But it's not inert. It's not stupid either. It's actually extremely intelligent, but not an abstracted intelligence, not a verbal intelligence or conceptual intelligence. That's where the knowing is. The real know, like when you know that you are, that's not something that's stupid. It's actually supremely intelligent. But it's not a concept. It's not a conceptual knowing. It's something else entirely. And this is what I call the inherent intelligence.
And it's completely different to some concept.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the difference between tapping yourself on the head and being hit on the head with a 10-ton brick, you know.
Yeah.
You can't...
Yeah, there's no way to mistake them.
Once you
see it clearly, there's no way to you don't need to wonder if that's it or not.
Yeah.
It's like wondering whether, thinking about standing up or standing up, they're very different. Thinking about standing, I can think about walking into the kitchen, and I'm thinking about walking into the kitchen, right? Or I can do this. They're very different. They're very, very different. They sort of look the same if you don't look too carefully. The forms that present themselves are very similar, but it's worlds away in terms of the texture of it, in terms of the dynamism of it, and the grandeur of it. Presence, yes.
How much control do you have to get there?
Well, you have to discover that. That's part of the trick. You have to find the control. And it's not a control that it is what it is. You can't expect it to conform to what you want to make it. You have to discover what it is and then use what it is to your benefit. It's like with a toddler. The toddler says, who doesn't know how to walk, but suppose they're precocious and can talk, and they say, "How do I walk?" And I say, "Well, you have to discover how to do that, and then you discover the inner resources that you can then exercise that will enable you to do that. And after you have done that, you will be able to walk." So walking is possible, and learning to do it is possible, but you can't think your way into it. You have to discover what is involved. And likewise, you do have actual resources. There is that which you can exercise. There is effectiveness you can exercise, but you have to learn how to exercise it. And you can't learn it by thinking about it or having it described. It's like learning to dance.
But it seems like
you do it by doing it.
It seems like the descriptions do help.
Sure. Well, that's what we're playing with here. Go to the fact of your actual experience, where you are experiencing as a verb, and where that is the only action that's happening. Find that and be in that perspective, and then see what resources you have. And you will see it. You will discover that directly. You won't discover that by thinking about it, because at that point you'll be beyond thought.
It's a funny little game.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's also a little bit like long division. When you're small and you're doing addition and subtraction, long division is something that just
terrifying.
But once you got it down, it's not terrifying at all.
Once you have a calculator, it's great.
When you look at this from the point of view of confusion, it seems confused and complex. But when you look at it, when you discover the trick of it, then it's not complex at all. It's very simple and effortless. But to describe it, it's hard to describe it and make it and convey the simplicity and directness and ease of it, because the descriptions tend to be from a conceptual point of view, which includes all this murky, sort of inherent murky confusion that sort of comes along with the terrain. I could put the actual condition functionally in words, but it would sound weird and abstract conceptually, even though it is not abstract and it's not weird at all. It's weird from an abstract point of view, it is weird, but from the experiential point of view, it's not at all.
Okay. Do it, please.
You are a non-spatial, hyper-intelligent, experiencing engager. And so all you need to do... Is that accurate? So all you need to do, you are that right now. All you need to do is go to the portion of your experience that exactly corresponds to, and then look at what your experience looks like from that perspective. And it sounds far out when you put it in words, but it's not far out at all. It's actually our everyday's experience. But that's pretty close to accurate verbalization of your actual
Can you
condition.
say it again?
Probably not exactly. You are a non-spatial, hyper-intelligent, experience engager. or experiencing engager.
Radiant.
Well, there's radiance in there too. That includes the engagement. The engagement part includes radiance.
That's good.
Because there's a dynamism in there. It's not passive.
There's pretty much everything in there.
Yeah.
So engager,
That's good. I like that.
engager.
Patented quick. Book title.
Just rolls off the tongue. Right?
Yeah, right. Poetry. I'm sorry.
Engager sounds like you're doing something.
Yeah, there is something being done,
Right.
but you can't verbalize what it is. But you're not just
You're
a
not
passive.
this, ooh, seeing everything. There's more to it.
Yeah, there is an activity. There is a dynamic engagement.
Okay, well, I wouldn't normally hear that.
Yeah.
In
I mean,
spiritual.
We know there's a dynamic engagement when we know all of these common sense. When you look at, you're engaged with your experience. You do things. You think things. You can reach out. You can pick things up. I mean, it's and sort of the idea that in the absolute sense, I'm just some plain vanilla passive screen on which everything's appearing, doesn't capture it. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. There's a very positive engagement. There's a positive dynamism of engagement with experiencing.
It's good to hear that because I've heard over and over again, you're just a screen, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, but that doesn't ring true. I mean, look at your experience. The absolute truth doesn't diverge from your experience. Mm-hmm. It's not something else over there that you'll get to one day. It's simply getting down to what this has always been. So it has to ring true to common sense, right? I mean, the feeling what I verbalized very specifically is not different than the feeling tone you've always had, probably. If you really parse it out and see what it refers to, it's like, well, sure, yeah, I am an experiencer. I am engaged. There is astounding intelligence displayed. I mean, not necessarily intelligence that I can get a handle on, but it's sure there or here, right? And all this stuff is more or less self-evident. But to be with the fact that you're experiencing from that perspective centrally, which again isn't a leap because it's where you already actually are and have always been, but just to see it from that point of view and to see all the elaborations we're used to carrying around as extra interpretations about the world and our bodies and our history and blah, blah, blah. See those as extra layers that are just sort of not really essential. It's just like baggage we carry around, or like to support the traveling library we sort of lug around with ourselves.
But okay, this is probably simplistic, but all the baggage isn't it all verbal? I mean, so if there's no
you could say that,
language, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, and there is no language where you really live.
So if you just
go to where you really are, and you're beyond language.
It's sort of subconscious that you're not paying enough attention to that's still there.
Yeah,
you're okay.
Sure.
Okay, that seems really simple.
Yeah. Well, it is really simple, actually.
Well, it's not simple to not have language there.
No, but it's simple to notice that where you are, there is no language.
Yeah.
Language is where it is, but you can see it from where you are, and you can even use it from where you are, but where you are, there really is no language.
So the only real problem is that constantly jumping back into language.
Well, no, there's no problem being in language. The problem is thinking you are in language.
Oh, I'm thinking that you are in it.
Language is like this cup. It's sitting where it is, and you can reach out and employ it anytime you want and put it back down, but you are not the cup. You're
when you don't put it
this.
back down, that's when
when you think that I am this, and oh, I'm on the table. I don't want to be on the table. It's like, I'm not on the table. I'm not in this body. This body is like the cup. It's a mode of sort of engagement, you could say. But the engaging principle is free of any of its modes, and yet it can employ any of them. So you can employ language. You can employ physicality, you can employ all these things, but you aren't. You are more primal, more primary, more fundamental than any of those things are. And when you see that, then all these things are like arrayed around you, like tools on a table, or like having all this stuff sitting on tables around us. I can reach out and use the computer. I can reach out and pick up a cup. I can reach out and turn the lamp off. They're at my disposal, but I'm over here. So, you don't, that's another sort of spiritual fallacy. I need to stop thinking. My thoughts are just, I need to stop thinking. I need to get out of my thoughts. It's like, no, you're not in your thoughts. You don't need to stop thinking or start thinking. Thinking happens over here, and that's fine. But you aren't over here. You're where you are.
Nancy said it was simple. And it is much simpler than we think it is.
Yeah, it's very simple. Again, all these descriptions make it, just keep adding elaboration and complication, which is exactly the opposite of the fact. It's on the contrary, it's a matter of paring off all these complications and just seeing that they're just like stories, And the simple naked fact, which is your experience, that's all. That's not news. Right? You all know that, right? The basic fact is your experience, right? This is self-evident. This doesn't require any great leap. But what if that was not just the basic fact, but the only fact? And then all these elaborations, like thoughts and stories and environments and all that, were there in the context of your experience, and you can engage with them or not to the degree you're interested. But they aren't the primal fact. The primal fact is your experience. And then all these elaborations come with, and they're there, and you can use them or not, but you aren't stuck with them because you're not in them. They're just there. They come with. They're like baggage.
Peter, one thing I'm getting out of Jen McKenna, and I haven't read, I'm only in the first book, but talking about mystical experiences versus truth.
Yeah.
And I had this naive idea that if you didn't have one of those experiences, you weren't very far along. Okay, I'm just not very far along because that never happens to me. It's like, I think what he's saying is you don't have to, that's very nice, but it's not relevant.
It's not really relevant.
And that's a huge relief.
Yeah. Truth is not something new. Your true condition is not something new. It's not something that that gets revealed to you and like, oh my God, I never knew. It's more like it gets revealed to you and you go like, oh, duh.
Yeah.
It's more like a simplifying than an achievement of some new height or something. It's more like all this stuff falling away and just being with absolute bare bones. But then those bare bones turn out to be infinite bare bones. So it's not like it's a reduction or a non-entity. Truth is spectacular, but it's not necessarily spectacularly spectacular. It's very normal, but normalcy turns out to be spectacular when you see what it actually is.
So what would you say about those experiences then? And why are some
They're interesting as...
hung up on them just because they're really fun? Or?
Well, sure, they're fun and they're exciting, and when you feel like you're stuck in normalcy and you define excellence or transcendence as getting something paranormal or supernormal or other than normal, then all these experiences seem like there's something really great and worth having, But all they really are is displays of the range of the possibility of normalcy. They're displays of the range of the possibility of what this can look like. This can look like anything. You probably heard me say that over and over again. And it's literally true. This can look like anything. In other words, what can experience look like? Well, it can look like sitting around in a room with a bunch of people having a conversation. It can look like astounding lights going off hyperdimensionally, interpenetrating, and universes being created and destroyed. It can look like anything. Literally anything. And so these experiences are simply proof of that and demonstration of that. And if you think you're in normalcy, they push the envelope of like, oh wow, Jesus, experience can really be far out. But once you see what experience is, you get it intrinsically that it's self-evident that it can be as infinitely farther out than the farthest out you can possibly imagine, or even possibly experience. It can always be much more. And that just comes with. That's just a non-entity. You don't necessarily need it displayed. You don't need to prove it because it's obvious.
So, are mystical experiences or meditation or whatever it is that people experience when they're searching, are those useful?
They can be useful.
They can be useful.
It depends. It depends on it depends on how they get integrated. If they're taken as what they are, which is demonstrations that that there's actually more, that what's going on is more than you think it is, and that can be powerful if you take that message and incorporate it and use it. If you take that as sort of carrot on a string that you're then addicted to chasing after the rest of your life, then that can become just a sort of a dead end of addiction to some goal that you are trying to recreate. It's like trying to have your first acid trip again. It's like, the point of your first acid trip is to have had it, not to have it. You did have it. It's like one supposes if any of you were of a criminal bent, one can speculate you might have. Of course, we know you're all upstanding citizens and wouldn't dabble in anything illegal.
So you think there are a lot of people out there that have had something like that and sincerely believe they're enlightened and they're teaching other people?
I know it for a fact.
There's nothing in them that's like a little voice going, this isn't it, this isn't all, or there's nothing going on with that.
Who knows? But it's the very nature of what this is makes it very, 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 as many words as you want, easy to misinterpret. I mean, hence all the layers of confusion and all the materialistic interpretations and blah, blah, blah that proliferate that humans are just swimming in. I mean, that's easy and effortless and self-verifying, and people don't even bother to question it. And the same applies with, I'm enlightened. But the nature of enlightenment is not enlightenment. The nature of enlightenment is what this is. And then when you see what this is what it is, whether you're enlightened or not. And so don't worry about whether or not you're enlightened, just see what this is. And then let other people worry about whether you're enlightened. Because you can't, the absolute apex, the absolute epitome is simply what this is. In other words, getting back to your roots, getting back to the origin that you never departed from, is as far as you can ever get, and in a good way. And so doing that is the goal, is the highest achievement. And then whether or not you're enlightened, according to someone's definition, is their problem, not yours. Because you have the certainty of your being, you have the certainty of what this is. Inclusive, because it includes everything. And then you have that, and then whether or not you're enlightened is like, hey, who gives a shit? That's just PR, I mean, that's one of the big in-jokes is everyone already is this, and everyone has never been anything but this. And recognizing that you are this actually doesn't add or subtract anything from you whatsoever. So when you recognize this, you recognize that, I've discovered what I am and what everyone is and has always been. It's like, yeah, whoop-de-doo, And so all of this big hoopla about enlightenment, even though on the other side of the coin, this is the pinnacle of human achievement, but it's also the simple condition of everyone and everything already. And so knowing it or not is actually kind of a little thing. So So it's, the sort of the myth of enlightenment is just, wow, way up there, it's huge, vast, capital letters, God, maybe 100,000 lifetimes I might aspire to be, in the same universe as an enlightened being. It's mythology, it's not what it really is, it's not what it's about. Enlightenment is just a name for recognizing what you have always been.
It's a very value add. I mean, it doesn't mean anything.
It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. On the other hand, it's true. It's a true condition. When you recognize what this is, you recognize what this is, and it's a fact. A person who is enlightened, a person who has realized what this is, it's a fact that is the case, and it's self-evident. It's self-evident to them, and it's obvious to others who know how to recognize it that is the case. But even having said that, it's still not really anything.
All the same thing. Everything is all the same thing.
Sure, everything's all the same thing. Everything is what it already is and always has been. And the nature of what it is and already is and always has been is that it is possible, in fact, even likely, that it will confuse itself with what it is and mistake itself for being ways that it isn't actually, because what it is slippery. Like if there's an analogy, if what it is a dream, the very nature of a dream is that it looks like something else. And so since a dream is that which looks like something else, it would be very easy to, if you're looking for a dream, it'd be very easy to misinterpret it as something else, because the very nature of what it is to be spinning off apparitions of something else. And what this is a lot like that. It's the nature of what this is to sort of spin off versions of it, apparent versions of itself, very much in the same way that dreaming spins off versions of itself that yet depart from and don't clearly display the actual condition. For example, dreams can seem to be relatively limited, relatively constrained, relatively causal circumstances where none actually exists. The dreaming itself is not constrained or causal or limited. And yet the evidence of dreaming, i.e. the dream, can appear as if it was limited and causal and so on. So this is an example of that. And likewise with this situation is also unlimited. This is actually an unlimited situation here, always has been. But it can appear as if it was limited because part of its mode is to spin off, you could say, apparitions of itself that might be taken as limited, and that have a lot of internal consistency as being other than what it actually is.
Limitations in a dream are strange.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in a dream, like, I can't run at all when I'm trying to. Other times I can fly.
Yeah.
And then, the limitations in waking life maybe seem to be bound within smaller constraints, but they seem similar.
It's equally arbitrary. I mean, some days nothing comes together,
Right.
You try to do things and everything just doesn't think. And other days, like, bang, everything's just grease lightning,
Right.
Things are popping and just things come together. And so it's a similar kind of thing, and the range of sort of qualities that seem to show up with it is ultimately unanalyzable, even though it seems. I mean, that's part of the aspect of this. Is this presents so much detailed, specific, we'll call it information. Just so much detailed, specific patterning as what it is. That's very convincing.
Yeah.
And yet, if you go look at all this detailed, specific patterning, it also contains an equal amount of indeterminacy. But if you're looking at the specifics, it's easy to ignore the indeterminacy. Oh no, this is concrete. This is very specific. This is like exactly what it is. It's locked in. It's there's no wiggle room. But then you look a little closer and say, okay, what exactly are these specifics actually?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden things get slippery. But the slipperiness is subtle. The indeterminacy is subtle. You have to exercise intelligence to notice it.
Yeah.
Whereas the specifics and the details of the patterning seem a little more obvious. For example.
Yeah. I had this eye injury once where I had affected my vision a lot, so it was not as good afterwards. So that seems to be consistently there. Then in a dream I can sometimes I can see perfectly, and sometimes I'm blind, and sometimes a whole range of things in between.
Sure.
So there's all that diversity. But then even I can see how when within the realm of seeing in waking life is just full of infinite stuff.
Exactly. It has a lot more range than we explicitly acknowledge.
Yeah, and that amount of range is huge compared to the amount. The difference between that and what I'm comparing the range to in a dream is almost the same.
Yeah. But again, the fundamental fact is that it's very easy for this to misinterpret itself because it has a proclivity to appear as if it was other than what it actually is. For example, this is actually a non-spatial, non-temporal event, and yet it appears as if it was spatial and temporal.
Right.
Just right off the bat, for example.
Yeah.
And and you can. I could go on for a long time talking about ways in which it appears to be a certain way when it isn't actually that way.
Yeah.
And so that is the recipe for potential confusion.
Right.
For potential misinterpretation, which of course we find to be the case. But to stumble upon what this actually is, all of a sudden, all this stuff becomes obviously and immediately apparent. Becomes self-evident. It's not like you need to explain it or even think about it. It's just completely obvious. You can look and you can know there's no space and time, and you can see the way in which there seems to be space and time, and it's all very interesting.
Yeah. Well, the dream analogy is really helpful in sort of questioning that.
The dream analogy is really excellent. It's a very powerful tool, and it's universally applicable. I can't think of a single shortfall in that it has, except that in the dream analogy we have the waking state to fall back on as a perspective.
Yeah.
And we don't have a readily available perspective analogous from the waking state to blah.
Right.
Even though in actuality we do.
Yeah.
Because the true perspective is to the waking state as the waking state is to the dream state.
Yeah. Sometimes I can, in a dream, I'll wake myself up because of outrage at what's going on in the dream. My cat is dead or something. I'm like, no, this can't be. And I wake myself up. And there's a thing in, actually, Judd McKenna, in the second book where he's quoting Mark Twain, I forget what the quote is from, but where he's just describing the outrage of this condition and how that leads towards waking up potentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Outrage is one of our most powerful allies.
Yeah.
Outrage if you take it far enough.
Right.
Why don't we take a little break and come back shortly? So we'll be back in about 10 minutes, online people. Here. Okay.
When you keep saying, when you know what this is,
Mm-hmm.
when you see what this is,
Uh-huh.
you're actually talking about something that is not readily accessible to most people. Are you not?
No, it is readily accessible, but they may not have the fortune to readily access it because they may be caught up in their confusion.
Right.
Accessing the knowledge of what this is not hard because everyone always has it. What's hard is to extricate ourselves from our attachment to our confused version of things.
So yes.
It's as if... but not necessarily.
With a caveat.
No, but this is profoundly true. We go to confusion. It's not like we're in confusion and we need to go to clarity. We're in clarity. That's where we live. That's what we are. And we go to confusion. We're actively going there. It's like a TV's on in the next room and Star Wars is playing and you're just a Star Wars fanatic. You know, you've got the little Jedi Knights and Yoda and all those models on your windowsill and you've got a big poster of Darth Vader on your wall and everything. And so you're sitting in this room, but Star Trek's playing in the other room and your mind just keeps going there. You go there. You let your attention be drawn into that. So we live in clarity, but we go from clarity to confusion because we're addicts. We think it's fun, we think it's good, we don't know any better.
Like objects, for instance.
Sure.
We go to objects.
Sure, yeah.
I think we see.
Sure, all that. Anything that any of our modes that we go to, objects, situations, self-importance, so interactions with people, worries, internal worrying about ourselves and our status in our lives, all these kinds of things, worrying about other people. I mean, all these are modes of soap opera, basically, that we go to habitually because we think they're important, and after a while we forget that we're going to them and we think we're in them. But in actuality, we never are in them. You live in clarity. You are clarity. You go from clarity into these. I mean, you don't ever actually leave clarity. It's not like you go from clarity, but you sort of extend a pseudopod of involvement into these soap operas, into these elaborated scenarios, and inhabit them.
So we have known clarity from maybe gaps in.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about some kind of unfoldment of some.
No, everyone knows clarity all the time. Everyone knows clarity very intimately, but we devalue it. We take it for granted. We don't think it's anything, and we think all this elaboration and confusion. We think it is something, and so we think it's important. So we go there. And this clarity, we know it intimately, but it's just nothing. It's, clarity, sure, okay, but what's happening? Yeah, there's clarity, but what's happening? What's going on here? And the what's going on is like, somebody tell me a story, quick. I need a story. What if there's no story? Then what's going on? It's like, just this.
Would you say it's it feels like it's a magnetic force that goes for my mass consciousness, and it's like, this clarity's over here, and you keep going, well, wait a minute, that is just debris and bullshit over here, and it's, all this muck, and then you're like, it's just this whole magnetic clarity.
But it's the muck that seems interesting. It's the muck that's magnetic.
Yeah.
We get drawn to it the way old women get drawn to soap operas. It's like... I don't mean all old women.
I don't even know what it's
Whoa. Let's say middle American.
There's a story.
You're just not old enough.
It's a stereotype. It doesn't apply. I'm sorry. Sexist, racist, genderist.
You know that's
Beast to honey, okay.
Yeah, peace on.
Much better, yeah.
It's nothing, you guys have to give up Darth Vader, and that's
Yeah. It was kind of close to home when I was talking about Star Trek. I'm not sure. This was from personal experience.
Anyway.
Lost all ability in one moment.
But this is the astounding fact about our spiritual condition, is that reality is not hard to find. Confusion is hard to let go of. We are unreality addicts, typically. And that's the problem. It's not that reality is hard to find. It's not that we're in confusion and we need to somehow make some heroic leap to some new condition of reality that we've never seen and we need to miraculously get. No, we're in reality. We are reality. We've never been anything but we're junkies. We are strung out on confusion, so that's where we're hanging out. No one's forcing us to. We very deliberately and explicitly and consciously go to confusion. We aren't aware we're doing it. We end up doing it unconsciously, and then we forget even that we've done it and we think we live there. But
I would say just enculturalization just kind of puts us there. And
sure.
I wouldn't say it's like, oh yeah, let's go.
But ultimately, it comes from enculturalization and all that, but ultimately it's individual. Ultimately, it's the individual that does it in real time. And when the individual stops doing it, it's the individual that stops doing it in real time.
But then it's like we have some say over it, and
well, you do, but you have to discover the way in which you have say over it. And it gets like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You do have control, but it's not the kind of control you're used to thinking you have. It's a different kind of meta-control. And you have to discover that control before you can really exercise it. So it's kind of paradoxical.
Can you say more about that?
I don't know.
Well, it seems to me, Peter, like it's sort of backwards. Like instead of trying to control what we do, it's more about maintaining our focus on reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the control has a lot to do with integrity. It has a lot to do with the word luck is coming to mind, but that doesn't capture it. It's more grace, but grace not as some abstract mythical quality. Grace as hearing the echoes of your own truth. The siren song of your profundity has a power to it, and it has a power to break the spell, the magical spell of the addiction to confusion. And I mean, this is why, even though I say there's control, there's only control when there comes to be control, and there comes to be control when you begin to spiritually mature, which does itself. So in that sense, arguably there's no control. But it's truer to say that there's control than to say that there's no control. Because it's not like it's a passive thing and you're just dragged along. But it is true that you can't do it until it's time for you to do it in your own unfoldment. Which is liable to be the case if you're coming to meetings like this. If you were out in a bar beating up drunks, then that would be a different thing.
Now.
Yeah, well, prioritize.
Or soap opera stars, perhaps.
And Peter, it seems to me like the control is more like changing gears on a car.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So that you're not going to kind of crash indiscriminately. It's a very it's a process you can actually learn to do.
Well, you learn it. Yeah, you learn it. It is not like the control that you usually exercise. It's another kind of a subtle internal meta thing. It's a tuning in, you could say. That's more than just passive again. It's a tuning in that is also kind of an empowerment. It effectuates a kind of a functionality.
How about this? It's an allowing control.
Sure. But the point is, don't worry about how to do it. That comes of its own. That reveals itself. The point is to know that you can do it and see what it is that you can do.
How do you know you can do it until you do it?
Well, you intuit that you can. You're here. You have glimpses. You have, whatever. You hear things that ring true. You whatever. But you get that. Wow. There is reality. You are reality. You have access to it. You are in it now, and you have a immature habit of going to unnecessary complication that is actually not advantageous to you in any sense. Just that as a template right there. It's like, okay, cool, interesting. So you sort of live with that and sit with that, and wow, maybe. What would it be if I didn't go to the confusion? If I was not going to confusion, what would be happening right now? And just sort of explore that, as you just play with it, You look into it. And you discover unconfusion. You discover clarity, and you discover it where you are, because that's where it is. It doesn't exist anyplace else. And once you discover it, then you see what it is, you see how it is, you see how to get to it, you see what confusion is and what it is and how to get to it, and you see the addiction, and you see the power of clarity, and you begin to appreciate that, and you lose the addiction to the confusion might fall away, and you find yourself going to it less and less. And even that's intermediate. Ultimately, it doesn't. After you realize what this is, and whether you're in confusion or not, it's irrelevant, because then confusion is this, and so you might spend a lot of time hanging out in confusion, but you don't give a shit, because at that point it's not an impediment to you. You're Teflon. When you know reality, you're that's what liberation means. You have a get out of jail free card. You can go anywhere within experience, and it's not entrapping.
The metaphor of addiction actually is a very good one.
It is, I think so.
Because there's all the things about cold turkey and treatment centres and
the whole deal,
and getting fixes and things.
No, yeah, it kind of lines up.
The thing I don't like about it is it's kind of like labeling of bad, kind of like this whole, you're an addict.
It's not bad. It's just a mode of functioning that is less rewarding than other modes of functioning. It's more baroque and less rewarding. You do more for less of a payoff by following an addictive strategy than you do by not following an addictive strategy. It's easier, and you get more out of it by not following an addictive strategy. But you've got to get that through your thick head, because the very essence of addiction is clinging to the belief that you're getting something from it. That, this is good. This is good. This addiction is good. I got to go here because it's an improvement on not going here. And when you get it through your head that it's not, that's when the whole thing falls apart. That's the real kicker that liberates from addiction, is when you get that, I'm going to all this effort and getting all of these side effects for what?
Actually,
there's a payoff here?
The only reason addicts stop is because the drug doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, sure. Well, it doesn't work anymore ultimately because you see that what you're getting from it is paltry compared to what you could get from less effort elsewhere.
But if the drug was, say, cigarettes, there's an awful lot of people who get scared of their addiction.
Sure. But it's the same thing. Ultimately, it's seeing that the payoff is not worth the baroque, is not worth the involvement, is not worth the effort, the investment of time and energy and emotional investment.
And it's also very doable, getting off.
Totally, yeah. You just have to see it. But seeing it's the kicker. Once you see the truth of it, then it's like, it's a no-brainer. It's like, I can go to all this confusion get torqued around and feel dissatisfied and suffering and hell and unclear, or like I can be in infinite fullness forever. Okay, let's see. Decisions. Maybe if I flip a coin, you know.
Peter, I want to make a comment. I think for me, one of the reasons why confusion is so seductive is because truth or reality, actuality is, it's hard to, for me it's difficult to stay with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just get pulled right back in. But I mean, I feel like I know what awareness is, I know what actuality is, I know what truth is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not something I can really grasp.
Right.
And so
Right.
I just get thrown right back in, and I catch myself going in and out, going in and out. But
Right.
I don't feel I can get a handle on truth.
Yeah.
It's just a very
Well,
slippery thing.
It is, and that's part of the learning curve. Is that truth is apparitionally extremely unstable. I could even say absolutely unstable. It's like you know when you're a kid in a fun house or something, they had these slightly conical round surfaces that would spin around, and they put you in the middle of it and start spinning, and you sort of get thrown off to the side of it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those things or been on one of those. But truth is kind of like that. It has a slippery dynamism where when you look for it and try and be in it, you find yourself automatically spun off into. It's like, what happened? You're like, where did this come from? It's like I was talking about earlier. We're trying to find a dream. The very nature of a dream is to spin off into something else. And so when you go find a dream, all of a sudden you're not in the dream anymore. You're in some world somewhere doing something, and that's just the very nature of the dream. And reality is kind of like that. So getting that and seeing that being with this, being with slipperiness, being with instability, being with constantly being spun off as a mode, that is the stability. The stability is one of constantly being spun off. It's like, you've heard me talk before about, it's like kind of like a sparkler. It's just constantly shooting off sparks in every which direction. And it's not like you get to the central flame and sit there. It's like, no, being with the sparkler is being constantly shot off in other directions. And yet that's truth. That's the very nature of what this is. It doesn't have, in a profound, or let's say in a powerful sense, it doesn't have a still center. It doesn't have a point you can get to where you sort of sit and, that's the fantasies, I'm going to come to the still center. Yeah, right. Try it. You're like, whoo! Oh yeah, okay. That lasted about 0 time. That was so much for still center. Meditators discover this. The whole art of meditation is learning to be with slipperiness. When you're a naive and a neophyte, you're sort of looking for stability. But when you become a more skilled meditator, you learn meditation is about letting go of slipperiness, letting slipperiness be slippery.
Peter, we have a question.
Yeah.
The internet, it says, which book would you recommend the most to get liberated like yourself?
Which book?
Is there
Electric Kool-Aid acid test. Can't use it. That's it.
Tell them to stay tuned Wednesday night.
Well, there's lots and lots and lots of good books, and they all are different angles. But, the most important thing to successful spirituality is edginess. Is a certain irreverence, a certain iconoclasm or disrespect for authority.
I got that.
I can see you're all in the right place.
The September 11th radar goes out.
I recommend Heidi.
Another real good book I could recommend is The Star's My Destination. Who's the author? It's a late 40s sci-fi. Very, very good book.
Shoot, who is the author?
There's another comment here. Should I mention? This one says that I have a disrespect for everyone except Peter.
Watch out.
The trap.
Do you have any tips on navigating the slipperiness?
Yeah, you learn to be comfortable with slipperiness, learn to be comfortable with ambiguity, learn to be comfortable with confusion, learn to be comfortable with falling down, learn to be comfortable with sloppiness, learn to be comfortable with, not winning, not losing, not even knowing whether you're winning or losing. I mean, when I say learning to be comfortable with it, I mean learning to be really comfortable, learning to be not just comfortable but at home with it, like, yeah, this is nice, this is home.
Well, you mean like in the presence of it, not...
Of course.
Well, because the spinning out takes me to the next story.
Yeah.
There can be really presence and present to the Shakti.
Yeah.
And,
But when you're comfortable with it, when you get more and more comfortable with the indeterminacy, then you find the indeterminacy even in the story, and then the story doesn't need a not be story to not be story. In other words, the stories are the spinning out too. It's not like they're spinning out and then you hit a story. It may look like that. It may feel like, there's a spinning out and then you end up in a story. But in actuality, it's a continuum. The spinning out is a story, and the story isn't really a story. It's just more of the spinning out, i.e. more reality. I mean, that's kind of the high watermark of what you discover, is that confusion is clarity. Confusion is radiance. Confusion is the divine presence, literally. But at first it doesn't seem like that, and so it's kind of a circuitous route to you extricate yourself from confusion, find clarity, and then when you really are with clarity, you discover that, oh my God, clarity is what's doing all this confusion, and so confusion is the primary mode of clarity. And so you learn to be comfortable with it. You learn to see that. So then you see that all of this spinning out into spontaneous spinning out into versions of itself is the very nature of reality itself. Just like the very nature of a dream is to look like other than itself. But it never stops being a dream, does it? Nothing ever actually appears. Whatever appears is actually just dreaming, just a dream. But it never looks like a dream, or rarely looks like a dream. Usually it looks like something. It looks like you're in New York, or you're talking to somebody, or, you know what I mean? It looks like some situation. But it never actually stops being dream. That's what dream is. Dream is that which doesn't look like dream. And when you get that, then it's like, oh yeah, this is dream. So you're in a situation, it's like, oh yeah, this is clarity.
But you're being comfortable with it is not being caught up in any...
Yes, that is the trick. A feeling tone of relaxation is a spontaneous disengagement without needing to disengage. You know, what really energizes the stories as addictions is we're pushing on them. There's a tension. When there's no tension, absolutely no tension, just whatever's going on, there's craziness, whatever, and just complete. That's what I mean by being comfortable. I mean really being comfortable, like absolute not pushing and pulling on it in any way, just letting it have its way impartially and and have absolutely no agenda, no even subtle agenda, subtle positioning yourself with regard to it. Then it opens up into clarity. I mean, this is the essence. This is the essence of Buddhism. In Buddha's first sermon, the Four Noble Truths, attachment and aversion is the cause of suffering. By attachment and aversion, he means pushing and pulling on these apparitions. And the third noble truth is that with the cessation of attachment and aversion is a cessation of suffering. This is profound. So when you stop pushing and pulling on these apparitions, when you're just okay with them, it's like, hey, I don't care. There's no more suffering. And no more suffering opens to clarity.
And then you don't perpetuate it.
Yeah, there's no perpetuation, there's no engagement, there's no nothing. And from that perspective, all of these apparent situations reveal their insanity and the fact that they're constantly spinning off into something else, and they reveal their impermanence, they reveal their non-existence, they reveal that whatever's happening, it's gone already, and it's already something else, and it's like in a dream where this is this, and then all of a sudden it's something completely different. And how did that happen? I don't know. It just happened. Who cares? But then in that framework, it's just a dream. So hey, it's just a dream. How can it be a problem? And when it's not a problem, there's clarity. There's no suffering. Yeah, I mean, the very essence of Buddhism is exactly what we're talking about. I mean, Buddha was just a guy who saw this stuff. This Buddha, with a capital B, and he sits there and he's got the long ears and he's got to be, have a certain posture. He's sitting in this position and he holds his hand like this or like this. It's like bullshit. He was just a guy. He was just a man, a human being, who saw this stuff, and he said, hey, he apparently debated with himself whether to tell anyone about it, and said, well, there may be a few people who get this. Most people aren't gonna. And so he decided to tell a few people, and he said a few words about this, and wham bang, he got the world's biggest religion 2,000 years later. Surprise, surprise. But he was just talking about this stuff we're talking about. He was just talking about what this actually is and the way it works.
So when you feel I just felt the feeling come up of I don't like this certain thing that's going on in my mind, and the tiredness, and it was a feeling of
right.
Oh, I don't like this. So
yeah, attachment, aversion, suffering.
Yeah.
Being lost in story, being away from clarity. Bam! One fell swoop. Drops on you from the sky like a boulder. Cartoon, in sort of a roadrunner terms.
So then you just relax with that. And
just relax. It's like okay. It's like okay. I don't like it. Interesting. So there's not liking showing up. Do I not like the not liking? Yeah. Maybe you don't. Okay, I don't like the not liking. I wish I liked it. Okay. I wish I liked it. I don't like it. I don't like it. Okay. Am I okay with that? And it's like, yeah, I can own that. I really do wish that I liked it. And all of a sudden you're in a point of okayness. You're in a point of, yeah, I wish that things were different, and I'm okay with that. And that okayness translates down the line to the whole system, and all of a sudden you're in okayness. All of a sudden the fact that you are pushing and pulling on it, you're not pushing and pulling on that fact. And so all of a sudden you have I don't know if you're following me, this is very powerful. When you can find a position where you're not pushing and pulling on the fact that you're pushing and pulling on it, it translates, it erases the whole thing. It's a really subtle trick that's very powerful. Can you do that? Like right now, with this thing in your mind?
Well, I lost it at one point.
Okay.
Most of it I was following.
Yeah. So find something you don't like right now in real time.
Yeah, my mind.
Okay, here's your mind. You don't like it. Is that genuine? Are you okay with the fact that you don't like it? I mean, is that the fact? You really don't like it? How does it feel that you don't like it? Do you like that you don't like it?
Following what you're doing, I can be relaxed with it.
Okay.
I can see, I can feel the relaxation.
In other words, you don't need to. If you don't like it, you don't. It's not like you need to like it. You don't need to. You don't need to deny the fact that you don't like it. But see that it's okay that you don't like it. And then once you get to that point of okayness, all of a sudden, everything opens up. Because there's balance there, there's ease. It's like there's this, there's not liking of this, and all of that's happening in the context of okayness.
So that's the clarity, is seeing all those overlays and how they're working.
Well, when you get to the okayness, the clarity just shows up like a magic trick. When you stop pushing and pulling on it, everything just opens and loses its edges and loses its borders and loses its tightness and loses its stuckness. Yeah. And you may have to go back several layers to get to that okayness. You may be wanting something to be a certain way, and you may be wanting the wanting to be a certain way. And even another layer, if you may be wanting the wanting to be a certain way, but then you ultimately, if you go back far enough, you get to a point where, yeah, and I'm okay with that. That's true. I can live with that. That's where I am. That's reality. And in that, there's a kind of this is okay. And then all of a sudden, the entire energy spectrum is just floating. It's not being pushed or pulled on. It's not a problem. It's not a wall that you're trying to push through. It's just floating there. Like a constellation in the sky. And then it's just in openness, and you're in openness, and that's where you always were.
That's really, it really relieves a lot of tension.
Yeah, well, that's
a lot. I mean, a lot of.
Yeah, you can put that in capital letters. It relieves all tension. If you do it right, you get to a point where there's zero tension in your life, and when you get to a point where there's zero tension in your life, you're in reality. Because in reality, there's all kinds of tension, but there's no tension about the tension, so there's no tension.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a trick.
So you got to pay attention.
Can you take that a little bit further and say that, or not say, but we're not doing any of it. It's
Sure.
Everything is being done.
Yeah.
And so just by seeing what's happening, all the confusion and the pulling and the pushing and all of that, it's just reality just spinning out, the other person's reality, as it were, plus my reality. It's all just being done. And we're not doing any of it.
Yeah. But you have to see that you are there. Not you can't. Just holding that as an abstraction won't do it. But you have to see that you are. That's where you really are. That's where you live. You live in this place where all this is appearing, and you're not doing it.
Well, I believe that.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that at some point it's going to become like
Well, play with feeling your way into it. Play with seeing the truth of that in real time, and feeling it. Feel. I'm not doing this, Like if you're engaged with somebody, it's easy to see. Well, I'm not doing what they're doing, so I'm not doing that. But then look at your own thoughts and say, see, I'm not doing these thoughts either. They're just, I don't want them to be there or not. They're just showing up. And then look at the emotions and say, I'm not doing these emotions on purpose. I haven't planned to have these emotions. They're just there. And then all of a sudden you can find the place. You're looking from the place. I mean, not in abstraction, but really experientially. You're looking from the place where you're not doing anything and all the stuff is just showing up. And then you're living there. You're living in that place of non-action.
But isn't it just trust and faith in knowing that you really aren't doing it and trusting that?
Well, it's trust at first, but it can be more than trust. It can be actually seeing the truth of it. Like I can I can trust that this computer runs off certain chips and all that, or I can take it apart and look and discover for myself, yeah, no, it does, it runs off the chips. And it's more than trust. I know it because I'm seeing it. See, so it's like, it's being with it in real time as it's actually doing its thing, doing its work, as the machine is turning and you're watching what gear is pushing out what gear and you're saying, oh yeah, I see how this works. So yeah, it's an extension of, the trust gives you an idea of what to look for, but then you would look in real time and see it actually happening. And you get, it's more fundamental than trust, it's direct evidence of your own experience. You see, oh yeah, I'm not doing this. These thoughts are popping into my head and I'm not putting them there. So you don't need faith because you're just seeing that it's the fact. It's just completely obvious.
Yeah, I saw that the other day. I think I mentioned it to you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I saw the thought come from nowhere.
Yeah,
And I saw
yeah.
the event come from nowhere after
Yeah.
the thought came.
Yeah, that's
First time I
great.
ever saw that.
That's great. That's really powerful. And don't worry about needing to see it all the time. Just see it whenever you can.
Well, just if it happened once, that's how
Yeah.
the machine works.
Yeah, and you know where to look. You know, now you've seen it, you know kind of what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And next time, some thoughts are popping in, you can just look, oh wow, I didn't put that there. It just popped there, just like a bird flying across the sky. You didn't put it there, it just happened to be there, mysteriously. Yeah, because this is discoverable, because it's the truth, and it's happening actually in our experience, so we can examine it.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask is about when you talk about seeing. I mean, we're always seeing. I mean, I'm here and I'm the background seeing this chair. I mean, this table, this computer. I'm seeing everything. So I'm the background seeing everything. So
Right.
we are always seeing.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, what more is there?
That's it. Just make sure you go all the way back to the actual background. So your body is seeing the computer, but your consciousness is seeing your body, and then what's seeing your consciousness? So, but again, and that sounds like an abstraction, but you can go there concretely. You can go there experientially, because you are there. So it's doable. It's not something impossible or too subtle. It's actually concretely available because you're already there. So it's doable.
So is knowing different than seeing?
No, one and the same. And the way I use the words, it means experiential presence, experiential, self-evident revelation, whatever. I mean, however you want to verbalize it.
There is another question here, Peter.
Uh-huh.
When we are experiencing our experience in our human body no longer, where does our experience go?
Well, we're never experiencing it in our human body anyway. It seems as if we are some of the time, but when we're in deep sleep it doesn't. When we're in dreams we're in some other body perhaps. So, it doesn't go anywhere, it's where it always is. Which again is not really spatial, it doesn't have a localization. Apparent localization appears within us. We don't have a localization. We are what localization appears in and disappears in.
Weren't they asking when something appears and then disappears, where does it go? Isn't that what they're asking?
I think they say when you die, where is your experience gone?
It never was anywhere, so it doesn't go anywhere. mean, the exact same question is when you go to sleep, where does your experience go?
Goes to sleep.
You know, Peter, I noticed that my current default addiction is to wanting to kind of figure out. There's an experience of being present, and then there's the veering off appears to be wanting to kind of get an overview, or to make some sense of what's going on,
Sure.
and to see whether there's some action to be taken or not.
Uh-huh. Sure. That's fairly typical.
Yeah. And so then I just have to go, okay, you know, back to the matter at hand, and then it's of no consequence at all.
Sure. And the spinning off ultimately is a version of the first condition anyway.
Uh-huh.
So you haven't even departed from anything. It just has a different spin all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah, it's like going on one of those slides. You come to the end and then you jump off, and then you have to run back up the stairs to kind of slide down again.
Yeah, sure.
The relaxation makes me realize how much effort it takes to hold it together to be an entity.
Yeah.
It's like running around constantly trying to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Just, oh.
But a lot of work.
Relax, and it's like, oh. There's this fear that I don't, well, no, I gotta exist. I gotta hold it together as some coherence.
But is that really true?
No.
Because
clearly.
functionality can show up spontaneously without having to have an artificial coherence. You can be very relaxed and still have a thought and still say something and still get up and move your arm or whatever,
But I don't know if it's just me, but there's some lifelong feeling that I'm supposed to hold it together.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the fallacy. You're looking at the addiction itself. It's like, oh, no, I have to do this. I have to be here. I have to be somebody. I have to play the game. Yeah. But just relaxing, challenging that, just relaxing, it's like, okay, I'm not playing the game, but I'm still here. Everything's still happening. But it's so much easier because at that point it's doing itself with no tension. and it's doing itself in openness.
Non-locality.
Yeah.
Enjoy that.
Yeah. I mean, it's luscious. It's such a superior mode in every way, and you don't lose any functionality. In fact, when you get comfortable with it, you may find you actually gain functionality because you have more spontaneity. You have more ability to just be non-linear and just do the right thing at the right time without premeditation.
Big habit.
Yeah, it's the big habit. But it's addressable with just this one simple thing. Just stop pushing and pulling, and all of a sudden, the entire thing just collapses. It's like a puppet, like a marionette when you let go of the strings. It's just,
The marionette becomes its own life.
well, lying there in a heap turns out to be its own life. And that turns out to be okay.
That sounds like a good life.
In the case of the marionette.
has.
Uh-huh.
So when you're trying keeping things together, trying to really be an entity
Uh-huh.
or a form or an object or whatever,
Uh-huh.
that's actually the imagination.
Yes.
And so at some point the imagination must just start to wind down, because thought and imagination are two different things. Because thought is actually, that's actuality, whereas imagination is the confusing, the confusion. And so does at some point the imagination just kind of like wind down and lose its momentum, or?
Well, they can or not.
'Cause
You know,
that's
I mean, that's what
what
we're talking about. Is we're talking about that little trick of noticing that you're feeding the imagination with all this importance and tension and sort of pushing and pulling. I mean, sort of. I'm describing it as pushing and pulling, or you could say wanting and not wanting.
Yeah.
You could say hoping and fearing. I mean, there's all different ways of putting the same thing. It's a subtle tension with regard to the flow of events that is feeding the imagination. And we're talking about is noticing that it is possible to let go of that pushing and pulling, and all of a sudden the whole character of the thing changes, and you stop feeding it. It's like cutting the fuel line in your car. The engine's not getting gas anymore, and so it stops going. It stops burning. And concurrently, there's a big relaxation and a big ease, because all that pushing and pulling is a lot of work, and it never really works either. So you're always worrying about it anyway, because it's frustrating because you're pushing and pulling and it's not really working. So you push and pull harder, and it still doesn't work, and it goes on forever. But when you just stop pushing and pulling, it's like, what a relief. Just let it happen, whatever. And so there's an ease there, and all that imagination just goes. It may or may not be continuing, but at that point there's no push on, there's no burn, there's no fire, the engine's not running, so it just coasts. And it just feels so nice just to let go. And then after a little while, you notice, and gosh, nothing stopped, nothing fell apart. My head didn't explode. I didn't melt into a puddle. I can still breathe. I can still think. I can still get up and do things. But it's in a context of just this is just easy. It's easy flow instead of I gotta do this. I gotta be here. I gotta sort of leaning into it and pushing on it, and subtly sort of pushing and pulling. Just discovering the trick of that you can just let go of all that, and you get a vast reward. And it turns out there's no downside. Things don't actually fall apart. Your life doesn't fall apart. Your life doesn't crash and burn. Things actually continue to work pretty well. In fact, maybe even better. And it's so much easier. What a load off. Yeah.
I talked to you about this before, I think, but I had another experience of like a lucid dream. It was pretty long and extended, and this thing happens in that case where everything seems to calm down, and like suddenly no people or things are imposing themselves on me anymore. And I just find myself in like this city just walking, and suddenly no one's really there. It's just kind of empty. Or go into like a restaurant and people just ignore me. And then I thought, I want to get hit by a car. Like that'd be really fun, but I couldn't find any really driving. And, so I don't know if that has any analog, but that's a surprising thing that happens when I become aware that I'm dreaming. It just seems like, and I probably didn't. I mean, I only have a small amount of time to play with it and experience it
Yeah,
before I go back into it or wake
Yeah.
up or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not like I've spent a lot of time there, but so far that's what seems to happen.
Yeah, I think that's symptomatic of, and the same thing happens in waking life when you stop investing all this tension in it. Your life tends to sort of simplify, and it's not that event around you stops, but it stops having anything to do with you.
Yeah.
It stops having much to do with you. You notice you're just here, and you notice there's all this stuff going on, and none of it really has anything to do with you. And you can leave, and it'll still be going on. You can come and go, and it's really kind of, you're a non-entity. You're not important, and it's not important to you particularly. It's just there. You know, we create importance and involvement, and it starts getting involved in us when we invest it with importance. You know, through the non-lucidity.
Right. You think that you can feel guilty because you feel like you're affecting people, or you feel
all that.
Yeah.
But when you're in neutrality, when you're in lucidity, when it's just event, you know, sort of neutral event, all of a sudden it stops being personal. It stops being about anything. It stops being about you, and so it tends to settle down in terms of impacting you or you impacting it. Most of my life is like that. You know, I just go around and I'm this anonymous person, and people ignore me, and I just go and do what I want. And it's as if I was never there.
Yeah.
Isn't that all of us?
What?
The other thing I noticed is even when I'm not lucid in a dream, which is almost all the time, that sort of mantra of it can look like anything is sort of permeated my subconscious or something. So I don't feel as stunned by, it takes the edge off kind of when the events in the dream are like upsetting or...
Well, the character of your dream, even if you're not lucid, the character of your dreaming will reveal the condition of your unfoldment. Because as you begin to get more integrated with the openness and with the more fundamental aspect of your being, of your consciousness, then that'll, even if you're not going to lucidity per se, there will be a knowing. You know, instead of just really being with things totally gullibly, superficially, even if you are to a large extent, there's still this sort of background knowing.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, yeah, okay. So it's almost sort of like a certain percentage of lucidity that's just always there.
Right.
Whether or not it's explicit.
Yeah. That's what
and in your waking life, you'll notice that too.
Yeah, I've been noticing that in my waking life too. I live a sheltered life in San Francisco, and I went to like a Walmart for the first time in Oakland or something the other day, and I saw these like, it seemed like garish and upsetting like things and situations and people. But I used to feel like I had to fight against that stuff or something. But now it's just like another way that it looks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, as the unfoldment proceeds, the whole character of our experience shifts. And it may be so gradual you might not even notice it But then if you reflect on what your life feels like now, and then reflect on what it felt like 5 years ago or something, you'll notice, wow, you know, it's really quite different. You know, there's a lot more sort of openness, a lot, you know, less craziness or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the mouse in the slowly boiling water is, you know, you might not notice it. Oh, no, it's frog, not mouse. Has anyone ever tried that? Well, there's a myth that if you take a frog and put it in cold water and put it over low heat, the water will gradually heat up, and since it happens so gradually, the frog won't notice the water gets hot until it's cooked.
And then you'll have frog legs.
Yeah, then you have stewed frog. But the point is less about the stewed frog than about if conditions change gradually enough, you don't notice that it's changing. And that's certainly been my experience in terms of spiritual unfoldment, because the entire character of your experience will change drastically
Yeah.
over sort of the arc of your unfoldment. But it may not be obvious because it happens very gradually and more or less as on a continual kind of a arc. It may, maybe not. Maybe you have catastrophic kind of.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It seems like I sort of feel like everything's the same as always, but if I actually if I compare,
think back to what your frame of mind, your typical frame of mind was 5 or 10 years ago or something, and just,
or like 20 years ago, so completely.
And then you go to
messed
Walmart.
up. Crazy. Yeah.
Frank's suggesting we check on Mythbusters for that foiled frog.
Yeah. I think I actually saw it there, but I don't remember what they actually said about it. It's the kind of thing that someone's probably actually tried, you know. It's so obvious.
So, when you were talking about the okayness of what's happening, whether it's your imagination going on or confusion or whatever, the okayness is that that you're not doing it, or
the okayness is that you're not wanting it to be different. You're not needing it to be different. You're not pushing and pulling on it.
and why would that be?
That comes. You may be pushing or pulling on it,
Precisely.
but if you see that it's okay that you're pushing and pulling on it because you're not doing it, then you can see that you're actually at a point of, wow, it's okay that this is happening just the way it is.
Because I'm not doing it.
If you're not doing it, then it has to be okay.
Right.
It's like the weather, you know.
That seems to be the only convincing, thought is that we aren't doing it, so therefore it's okay.
Sure. Yeah, and like we were talking about earlier, it can become more than a thought by seeing the truth of it in real time. See that when as thoughts happen or as events happen, they happen spontaneously, and no one has control over them. We don't control what we think. We don't control what we feel. We don't control what happens outside us. It just happens. Mysteriously, ultimately. And when you see that, you can't control it. So since you can't control it, you don't need to control it. And since you don't need to control it, you're off the hook. You're on the point of okayness. It's like, okay, this is happening.
That works for me.
Yeah, sure. It's about quitting time, so I'm going to say goodnight to the online people.